Welcome to BuffaloRumblings.com. My name is Matt Warren. I'm joined tonight by Niners Nation editor David Fucillo, not Fucillo. And if you folks live in New York and know anything about Billy Fucillo, he's huge. He's one of the biggest car dealers in the planet, and his name is spelled exactly the same way as David Fucillo's. How you doing, Fooch?
I'm doing good. Actually, it's my understanding that Fusillo is the correct way to pronounce it, but because usually it takes two C's to get the ch sound, but my family, for whatever reason, has gone with Fucillo the whole time.
Anglicized American names, isn't it the greatest? Yes, my name is pretty straightforward. That's why there's a million of us if you search for us online, which has its good points and its bad points.
Exactly.
On to another guy with, I don't know, kind of a pretty easy name to say, Greg Roman. Greg Roman was the offensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. He is now the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. What do you want to say about Greg Roman right off the top to get Bills fans just a little tip of the toe in the water?
Well, it's interesting because obviously whenever an offense struggles, the first person that gets blamed is the offensive coordinator. It doesn't matter what the reality of the situation is. The offensive coordinator is generally going to be, well, offensive coordinator or the quarterback, but Greg Roman got a lot of heat in San Francisco from the fans and from the media, but I think really the problem in trying to figure out what Greg Roman's deal was is that he was so attached at the hip to Jim Harbaugh that we really weren't able to tell, okay, this is Greg Roman's offense, this is Jim Harbaugh's offense, and here's doing this and that. I would say the most basic thing, and based on what I've heard has been said about his role in Buffalo, he's definitely more focused on the run game. That is kind of when he was at Stanford, he was the run game coordinator. When he was in San Francisco, he was the offensive coordinator, but it seemed like there were a lot of different people involved. There were a lot of different chefs in the kitchen, so to speak, deciding on plays and designing game plans.
That's actually the term that Brian Galford used on our website today, was too many cooks in the kitchen as far as the offense goes. They hired a senior offensive assistant. They have Greg Roman, of course, coming in as offensive coordinator, and then they've got David Lee and Sanjay Lal, who, according to Vic Carucci of the Buffalo Bills, are going to be in charge of the passing game. And now Jason LaCanfora from CBS Sports is reporting the Bills also might be interested in retaining Nate Hackett's services in some capacity as well. Maybe he can run the passing game. I don't know. It's just there's a lot of different cooks in the kitchen. You said that there were reports of that. I saw that you had said something about, was it a wide receiver saying the wide receiver coach had called a play in the red zone or something like that? Were other people making play calls for the San Francisco 49ers other than Greg Roman?
That's what it sounds like. I know the 49ers are still looking for their own offensive coordinator, and one guy they're looking at is Jeep Christ, who was their quarterbacks coach during Greg Roman's time here. And if you go back when they beat the Saints in the playoffs in early 2012, that final 2-minute drive with the game-winning touchdown, Jeep Christ called all the plays on that drive. Like that was his drive. I've heard mentions of different coaches being responsible for 2-minute drills or some red zone plays or a little bit of this and that. And so there were a lot of different people involved. Plus, Roman would make the play call. It would go through Harbaugh. Like Harbaugh would relay it to Colin Kaepernick or Alex Smith. So who knows what he was doing when he would get the play call.
Right, that was going to be my next question. So was Greg Roman up in the booth calling the plays, and then it had to be relayed down to someone on the sideline to call it in, because that's the chain of command that the NFL makes you do. You can't call in a play from the booth. You have to do it from the sideline. Was that always Harbaugh that was talking directly to the quarterback, whoever it happened to be?
That's my understanding, yes. Roman was always in the booth upstairs, and I'm pretty sure that he was always calling it into Harbaugh.
That would at least make a little bit more sense as far as, say, a 2-minute drill situation where you don't necessarily want the delay from the booth down to the field. I know that the Bills toyed with that a lot, with Nate Hackett going up into the booth and then coming back down and going back up and back down. And good or bad, I mean, Nate Hackett's one of the, I don't know, most energetic guys in the world. What's Greg Roman going to bring to training camp practice, to every day in and out of of the NFL grind. Nate Hackett was a guy that would literally run down the field during training camp when a guy scored a touchdown to, like, jump on him in the pile. Is Greg? Well, I know Greg Roman's probably not going to run down the field and do that. I mean, but is he going to be like really energetic like Nate Hackett was?
I don't. He's not super energetic. I know just from his press conferences alone, he. I guess one word you might use would be like cerebral. He's a guy that's not like trying to like make a lot of noise and this and that. He kind of is a little more even keeled. He's not a guy that you see jumping up and down, yelling and screaming. At the same time, I know Anthony Davis, 49ers right tackle, had talked. I believe he's kind of been displeased with the way that with the way that Roman tried to implement the offense, and I think part of that was more just not just the fact that it was no longer effective, as opposed to he said he had no problem with him as a person, so it wasn't like he thought that he was mistreating him or treating him poorly or whatever. It was more just X's and O's and that sort of thing. So he's never struck me as a guy that's over the top, rah rah yelling and screaming, that kind of thing.
Okay. He mentioned the offensive line in his press conference when he was introduced as Bill's offensive coordinator on Tuesday, and people asked him what kind of offensive lineman he would prefer. Lighter guys, heavier guys, guys that were great in pass pro, guys that were run block, and his answer was something along the lines of, I want the whole pie. And his hands were out like this, and like it looked like he wanted to eat a gigantic pizza pie or something like that. But what kind of offensive lineman is Greg Roman going to be going after this year? Because the Bills' offensive line was not very good in 2014, specifically at the guard positions. How are they going to be able to improve? Who are they going to look for? What does he ask his offensive lineman to do with this big pie?
Well, he definitely, I mean, with the 49ers at least, and I believe at Stanford as well, I'm not 100% sure, they were pretty big guys. They were not, they ran a lot of power. They did not run zone blocking schemes, that sort of thing. It was more power type formations. You've got they like to use a lot of they'll run a lot of different plays from the same formation or from the same personnel groupings, but they'll mix it up. You frequently early on, especially in 2011, 2012, they used a lot of heavy sets where you'd have, instead of a third tight end, you'd have a 6 offensive tackle that you'd roll, a 6 offensive lineman that you'd stick out there. And they use a lot of motion. You'll see guys moving every which way before the snap. And a lot of it is just kind of to create mismatches, to create advantages in how you're, when you're running the ball, obviously, running back's supposed to look for the hole, cut through, do whatever, that sort of thing. But the idea being that you use misdirection a little bit. You're still using power. You're still using big guys, but it's almost like you're trying to out-finesse them at times through a power rushing attack.
Okay, so that leads into the next conversation, which is about the running backs that we want to talk about. Fred Jackson's still under contract, obviously getting up there in age, but I've learned to stop doubting that guy because he's just awesome. C.J. Spiller, not under contract, free agent, and then there's Boobie Dixon and Bryce Brown. You're familiar with Boobie Dixon, obviously. Why didn't Boobie stick in San Francisco or maybe get more carries in San Francisco to have an opportunity to stick in? And is he a guy that we should be penciling in as maybe the number 2 guy behind Fred Jackson next year?
Dixon's an interesting one because he was very popular with fans because he's a very gregarious personality, if you want to call it that. But I don't know. I mean, I think he's not a bad running back. He can do some things. I know they used him a little bit in goal line packages and short yardage situations. Part of his problem has always been he dances a little too much. It feels like he's improved on that, but that's kind of what slowed him down early on. He was always there. He would put up some yards in the preseason, but he just couldn't just find that hole and hit it. He'd always kind of be looking around for whatever he could find, and so I think that kind of slowed him down a little bit there. And then Harbaugh, because he joined the 49ers in 2010, I think Dixon did. Harbaugh came in 2011. He was always going to be behind Frank Gore. The team drafted Kendall Hunter. He's dealt with some injuries as well, but Kendall Hunter, Michael James, Carlos Hyde this year, they just have never really been fully sold on Dixon as anything more than a special teams guy who can fill in on occasion in short yardage.
and that's pretty much what he did in Buffalo. And then Fred Jackson and C.J. Spiller both went down with injury, and he carried the load for a couple weeks. And I'm not going to say he did a bad job. I think he certainly atoned himself. I don't know if he's going to be the guy going forward when Fred Jackson retires and C.J. Spiller's gone. I certainly don't think that's going to be the case. But it was interesting that he came from San Francisco, and now Greg Roman's coming to join him. The last piece I wanted to talk about is the quarterback situation. And the Buffalo Bills general manager, Doug Whaley, when he was doing his head coaching candidate interviews, including when he interviewed Greg Roman for the job, they talked about E.J. Manuel and the ability of the new head coach to resurrect his career and work with E.J. Manuel. Is there any reason to believe that Greg Roman can develop him as a quarterback? I mean, we've talked a lot about the running game because that's apparently where his focus is going to be, but he is the offensive coordinator. He said today he's going to have a hand in every position group, including quarterback. So we have to at least take him at his word now. What can we expect from the quarterback position moving forward with E.J. Manuel, a guy named Jeff Toole from Washington State University that was an undrafted free agent, and I don't know, nobody. They haven't called me yet, but they're gonna have to add somebody. So what can we expect from the quarterback position in Greg Roman?
That's probably the hardest question to figure out because it felt like, they started with Alex Smith in San Francisco for a year and a half, and then Colin Kaepernick took over. With Alex Smith, they ran a very conservative offense. That was when the power rushing attack was really at its height. Was in 2011, 2012. The idea was strong run game, strong defense, great special teams, and Alex Smith just don't lose it. And obviously, in 2012, Smith was really taking a big step forward, was starting to look pretty solid before the concussion, and he looked great last year, or in 2013 in Kansas City. But once they switched over to Colin Kaepernick, in 2012, they focused, there was a lot of read option, a lot of using the legs, a lot of just, because a lot of it was just nobody knew what to expect from Colin Kaepernick, so they were able to kind of mix and match it. Over the last 2 years, 2013, 2014, it really seemed like they were trying to develop him into more of a pocket passer. I don't know if that was really, if they had this notion, okay, we're going to be here a while, we want to, we'll go through the bumps and bruises now and hope that he emerges on the other end as a true dual-threat quarterback. But I don't know. Again, part of it also is Jim Harbaugh is, viewed as this quarterback whisperer type. But even that, it's like, he had Josh Johnson at the University of San Diego, he had Andrew Luck, and then he had Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick. This last year, it was really hard to figure out what they were trying to do on a regular basis and what they were trying to develop with him. So E.J. Manuel, I'm not anticipating some great revelation. I
would take 2011 Alex Smith, game manager, don't screw it up. That's the Rex Ryan moniker anyway, I think. And, they could get to the playoffs using that. They can get to the AFC Championship game using that because both the 49ers and the Jets did the same thing with, minimal quarterback play, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think I would imagine that they would, yes, the 49ers did that, and I think it makes sense given that. And again, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It feels like Colin Kaepernick has more physical tools than E.J. Manuel. Obviously, it's still a long way to go for actually executing it, but it feels like Kaepernick's got generally seems to have a bigger arm, bigger, bigger legs, the whole, all
He's certainly got more swagger, and that was always Manuel's problem, is that he didn't have the cojones to throw the ball where I think Kaepernick just has that mentality. He's got, I'm not going to call him a gunslinger, but he's got the confidence that he can make the throws, he can make the runs, and Manuel would run out of bounds or throw the ball away where someone else might do something different.
Yeah, given, you guys obviously have a very solid defense. You've got the running backs to have a good running game. Again, obviously if they can stay healthy. But it wouldn't surprise me if you saw like 2011 49ers type play on the offense where it's just like, okay, EJ, don't screw this up. We're gonna keep it simple. Take the sack. It would. I think you'll see if that happens, you'll see him take more sacks, throw fewer interceptions. You'll yell and scream a little bit because it's like he was wide open. You'll have a little bit of that, but it's like if he doesn't make too many mistakes, it's not too bad.
We're talking about the passing game with David Fooch Fucillo from Niners Nation. And is Sammy Watkins the best wide receiver that Greg Roman's going to be coaching in his entire NFL career?
Odds are pretty good. I think that's. I think it's safe to say at this point, yes.
Okay. So what kind of receivers did? I mean, there was a lot of names in San Francisco, including Stevie Johnson, the former Bill, but never really. I don't know. Anquan Bolden was kind of on the downside of his career. Crabtree was something, and then what was it? Roman holding back the wide receivers in San Francisco, or was it the opposite?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting if you kind of take it in bits and pieces. In 2012, Michael Crabtree had the best year of his career. 2013, he tore his Achilles. 2014, I don't really know what was going on. They traded for Anquan Bolden in 2013 before the season. He put up back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. He's actually playing. He's been their best receiver the last 2 years. They brought in Stevie Johnson. He apparently was dealing with a knee issue for half the season that nobody really knew about.
Yeah, that happens a lot, by the way.
That's what I figured. The thing is, I mean, really, there are three similar receivers. I mean, obviously Stevie Johnson's unorthodox or whatever you want to call him, but he's, I don't know, people say possession receiver and think there's sometimes negative inclinations to that, but they're basically they're three talented possession receivers. Vernon Davis was the guy that could break things open over the top. This past year, he was dealing with injuries and all sorts of just whatever, and so they didn't have that game-breaking receiver. So for the most part, defenses could play up close to the line because they knew Bolden, Crabtree, and Johnson are not guys that are going to beat them deep.
So let's just wrap this up with Niners Nation by asking: is Greg Roman a good hire for the Bills or a bad hire for the Bills?
It could be a good hire. I think given their emphasis on with Fred Jackson and the run game and kind of trying to build if you're trying to build a strong defense and a solid run game, I think he could be the guy that could do that for you. I don't think I wouldn't expect big things at the quarterback position as it's currently situated for them. I think he can do he can get enough out of EJ Manuel or whoever to get to the playoffs and be a competitive team, but you're going to need a strong defense and a strong run game. And again, I think if you've got a strong run game, Greg Roman could be a good hire.
Yeah, there's just less margin for error that way, and the 49ers found that out, the Jets found that out, and sometimes you need the quarterback that can put it on his back, and Alex Smith did his best to do that, and then ended up leaving and all that other stuff. But that's what happens. Thank you very much, Dave Fucillo from Niners Nation and SBNation.com. You guys can follow him at Niners Nation, and then you have you have a personal Twitter account, right?
Just David Fucillo.
At David Fucillo, and it's right on the screen for you. Thanks a lot, David, and have a great night.
All right, you too.